did you feel like there was a type of person who generally falls for this? And then I guess related to that, did you talk to family members? Did you talk to people who like really tried to get through to their fam who had
Yeah,
fallen down the rabbit hole?
it's interesting. I mean, there is a type. Initially, it was a lot of people we might think of as like Trump rally goers, older, whiter, evangelical Christian. But really, especially during the pandemic, it broadened out, and we started
Yeah.
seeing a lot more people of color, younger people, more women, just because everyone had a lot more time on their hands, and there really was a sort of chaotic situation that everyone was looking for answers to. And of course, things like Jeffrey Epstein's mysterious death, all these things kind of bring in normal people into it. And so, I mean, often it's someone who is maybe involved in another, what they call sort of like stigmatized knowledge, something that like is already a little odd, but they're into, like Bitcoin, for example, or people into like natural, like sort of wellness stuff. And so they've already
Yes.
seen this thing ridiculed, and they like it. And so then they say, well, maybe this is real too. And they get
Yeah.
into it through that. And so I talked to these family members, and it really is sort of an undercounted tragedy, I think, where all of a sudden you have this family member who comes home and says, like, you heard about QAnon? And they start unloading, and it often rips these families apart. I mean, I talked to a woman whose husband got addicted to coke because he had to stay up all night reading the clues.
Yes.
And he started having all these affairs with fellow QAnon believers. And, I mean, it really just destroyed their family.
That's awful.
Sounds like he's not even in it for the QAnon. He's in it for the coke and sex.
I mean, it's funny you say that. With the
no, I have to do this, babe.
Yes, exactly. There's maybe some other attractive parts of this as well. Yeah.
That's the best pitch I've ever heard for QAnon.
All the coke and sex, man, which somehow actually don't go along that well together. Anyway, but I wanted to also ask the laundering of Q and the way that, yes, like 6 months ago, Trump had the QAnon anthem at his rally, and how more and more you're seeing Republicans sort of flirt with Q and then kind of back away when they get asked about it. But how did it get laundered, and like how high up has that reached, other than, I guess, the fucking White House itself?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I think so much of the conspiratorial elements in the GOP, particularly after 2020, I don't think we would have without QAnon, or certainly as strongly. I mean, this idea that, there is this kind of mysterious force behind everything, and that everything, I mean, y'all were talking about the school shooting, all these things are false flags,
Right.
that sort of any news event is not what it seems. Look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, right, who is a really hardcore QAnon believer and is now one of the most powerful members of the House Republican caucus, raises a ton of money, is really deeply entrenched there. Donald Trump, I mean, he posts QAnon memes like all day on Truth Social. He posts pictures of himself wearing Q buttons and stuff.
Jesus.
And so, I mean, really, he's deeper into it than he's ever been before. And so I think in 2024, we're going to see potentially him get more into it, especially now that he's implying that Ron DeSantis is a pedophile, which of course would go right along with QAnon.
Can you, like, numbers wise, how many, like, hundreds of thousands of people?
Oh, millions, easily. Yeah. If you look at the polls, and I try to take the most conservative estimates. And so when people are asked, do you believe in QAnon flat out, it's often 3 to 7% of the country, or of voters.
Jesus
so that's,
Christ.
and I mean, there was a New York Times story that said, look, I mean, you look at that and say, well, it's not a majority, I guess, but that's more than a lot of major religions in the United States. That's millions and millions of people. And when you say more broadly, do you believe there's a satanic pedophile cabal, etc., that's like 15-20%.
Fucking 15-20% of
like voting age adults. Yeah.
Jesus Christ. I was like, let's go. Let's leave. No more internet. No more America. Bye. I'm done. I'm so done with this country. You know what? This is the moment I had a run up to the 2016 election, sitting outside of I decided to interview people outside of a market basket, I think it's called, which is like in New Hampshire. It was very cute. I thought it was fun to do that. And this one woman was like, ISIS calls me every day on the phone, and they want it. They're trying to get me. They're trying to talk to me. And I'm like, are you sure that's not, the phone company trying to get you to switch, to another line or whatever, like adding a line? And she's like, no. And she looked me right in the eyes, guys. And she was like, no, ISIS calls me every day to recruit me. And all I could think was, have this country. Like, bitch, have it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to fight you psycho for this? Like, how do we? So I guess that's my last question, and then if there's
I
other
gotta tell you,
thoughts.
well, let me just say this:
Yeah.
hearing that, I really got to stop prank calling people, telling them I'm recruiting them for ISIS, because it clearly is
Hi,
fracturing
ma'am,
this
you have
country a
been
great deal.
selected. I've got a very exciting opportunity for you. But I guess my question is, how do you stop them? How do you stop this? Where does it have? Who has to take the lead here?
Yeah, I mean, I think on one aspect, the good news is that, I mean, we saw in the midterms that a lot of these, it could have gotten a little crazier, and instead the Republicans won a lot fewer seats than were expected. I mean, there was a whole QAnon coalition put together by one of these JFK Jr. guys that was all the Republican nominees in battleground states to be secretaries of state, and so they would
Yes.
have controlled key elections in 2024. All of them lost. So, I mean, that's a bit of good news. I mean, overall, I think, unfortunately, this kind of QAnon or this kind of conspiratorial thread under another name. As you mentioned, it used to be Pizzagate, and it sort of changed form. I mean, I think it'll be with us for decades. I think the answer really is, and this is a big ask, but often when I talk to these people, it's some real deep material issue that brought them into it. I mean, it's, they have like huge debts, they have a disease, an illness they can't cure, they don't have insurance for, all these sort of insane, personal, really deep issues. And instead of saying like, man, it's pretty messed up, we don't have health insurance in this country or whatever, they instead, are driven into this kind of cabal or blaming, all these anti-Semitic visions and QAnon, all this stuff. And so I think just improving people's lives materially would help a lot. But, again, Republicans control half the country. So who knows when that'll happen.
Yeah. Conspiracies are just so there and ripe for the taking, when actually everything else, like corporate greed, is completely there and ripe for the taking. But that's too obvious. I mean, I think that's the other thing that, like, the attraction of conspiracies is like you're onto something that nobody else is, and there's a built-in community. And I would love to say the same thing about the left. We are not necessarily as, warm and like welcoming. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's hard. Like, whatever, labor unions are down, in terms of like the number of unions there are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which it's hard to generally have empathy for some of these psychos, but I appreciate that. I guess my last question is about tech, and like, how did, Facebook and other tech platforms cash in on the conspiracy theory, and what have they done about it since?
Yeah, I mean, really, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook were all huge in terms of spreading QAnon. I mean, the posts are originally on these really hard to use websites like 4chan and 8chan and stuff that, I mean, you're talking about the average sort of baby boomer. They're not going to wade through all this stuff. So you have to have something like YouTube where it can be packaged into these really appealing commercials. And we know that, I mean, on Facebook, they had an internal study where they created an account, fave Donald Trump, Melania Trump, relatively mainstream Republican figures. And suddenly Facebook is saying, hey, you want to get into QAnon? And pushing that on people because, these platforms want engaged users who spend more time on the site, and QAnon people do that because they're so mad and they're researching all this stuff. And so really, I mean, these algorithms and obviously the people behind them played a huge role in growing QAnon.
Yeah, it's just the one, like, watch more. Like, I just ended Succession, the first episode last night, and then HBO has autoplay. Now they're autoplaying the, some other bullshit I don't want to watch. But that's it. Just everyone's got to do their autoplay. Hey, if you like this cat adoption website, can I interest you in a bunch of, adrenochrome sucking cabal pantsuit wearers? I
It's
don't
very
know. Like,
frustrating because I'm trying to get my stand-up comedy into this algorithm real bad right now. And I listen, I'll start talking about Q if it'll get my jokes in front of some people. It's amazing. They're doing it so much better than me. I got to give them props where props are deserved.
What's so fucked up about that, Gianmarco, is that you're actually not, like, people enter into fame and money because it's so easy to tap that, like the third rail of like being a conspiracy theorist right winger. And we've seen it happen. And it's a guaranteed built-in audience. And you could even start by being kind of ironic about it. It could be a bit, and then it just becomes real because you're actually getting more followers and more clout for saying those things.
I was going to say the bar for talent to do that is very low.
They're casting.
You see the guys who become like the king QAnon comedians or musicians, and it's the bottom of the barrel. So, I think it's a right field for you.
None of them are class boys, is what we're trying to say.
Yes.
None of them are soul cyclers. Okay, I promise I'm gonna let you go after this question. Does it matter that we now know, thanks to in part the HBO documentary Into the Storm, that we know that Q is currently just an operation being run by dude bro whose name I'm forgetting, and I don't give a shit.
Yeah, it's
what his name
Ron and Jim Watkins,
Yes,
this
by
son and
Ron and Jim.
father. And
Yes.
you know, and so they deny it for what it's worth. I mean, it's not, I would say, 100% proven, but you know, maybe 99% of the way there. You know, frankly, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's certainly interesting to know. But for a lot of QAnon believers, I think they, as it sort of became more clear that this was kind of a guy in his mom's basement, the classic type, they said, well, you know, maybe Q wasn't really Michael Flynn, or it wasn't Don Jr. giving us clues,
Right.
but what he taught us is real. And so, you know, let's set the Q thing aside, but the adrenochrome, the tunnels, the kidnapping, all that stuff, that is real. And we, you know, we just need to, honestly, we need to redouble our efforts to bring on the storm.
It's the same as religion. It's the same thing. It's like,
It is
well,
the same.
maybe he wasn't resurrected, but the homophobia, I don't mind the homophobia. It's the same thing. Oh God.
It really is. And that's it's very, very scary. Any hope? What's the hope? What do we I guess we sort of talked about, I don't know.
Well, you know, sometimes people come out of it. I mean, not a ton, but you know, it's often sort of an idiosyncratic thing that there's one particular thing that convinced them QAnon was real, and then they see that disproven. Like it was that Trump said tippy top at an Easter egg roll, and you know, you think of that as kind of a classic Trumpy phrase, and they said, "Oh my God, it's real." And then you know, someone showed this QAnon guy video of Trump saying this many times before, and he said, "Oh, I guess it's fake," you know. And so people come out of it sometimes.
What's stopping, like, you know, an undercover person pretending to be Q and guiding them towards feeding the homeless? Like, what's stopping? Because Q is this kind of mysterious, ethereal being. Why? I mean, wouldn't the smartest thing to be, you know, for someone to pose as Q and gradually shift them into maybe a better place? I mean, isn't that really the only game to play, as opposed to being like you're stupid or crazy?
Well, you'd have to sort of log into the Q account, which requires a password. So it's a little complex, but you know, that hasn't stopped people in the past. Like the JFK Jr. thing was, you know, the letter after Q is R. And so one day someone just said, yeah, I'm R, I'm Q's best buddy, you know, and then like, that's how you get into it.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's really not impossible. I mean, I wish you luck.
It's like the opposite of deprogramming. It's just like it's reprogramming.
It's reprogramming.
It's just guiding a little this way. I think that's the only way.
Yeah, Q says go outside and talk to your families.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Q says call your kids. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.